diplomats, Ambassador Puri. But actually, my question was going to be that is there a sense of disappointment that India must feel with the United States of America? I remember one of our earlier programs, Ambassador Sinha made the point that India, must raise this strongly with the Americans. The 2+2 has just happened, and India did raise it. It was in the readouts and so on that followed. But then to have this article come out after that, even as a leak, and to remind our audience that the Canadians said it was the Americans that shared intelligence about the so-called India hand in the Niger killing under the Five Eyes grouping. Is there a sense that America doesn't have India's back on this, that in a way America is making light of India's concerns on terrorism?
Barkha, this is a very complex question, so allow me a minute or so. One, I like what Terry mentioned, but he used a different P word. I think let's use the more correct P word, which is power. And let's have no qualms. United States, Canada is Canada. Remember what Suhasini mentioned, that for years and years on end, we literally cut off Canada from our diplomatic action, activities, etc. So we did take action at those particular times. Things have moved on. I don't have to go into that. Neither do I want to go into domestic political kind of thing, because that then muddies this entire discussion. Now, there is little doubt, for people like me who have been posted in the United States, Panu and people like him were constant bugbears as far as we were concerned. I mean, we were too small a fry for him to, set out these summonds, etc., as it is called. But he would do it all the time, which would make life extremely difficult for all of us. The thing is, obviously, these chaps have been tolerated. But remember, in the systems, there are a number of sets of players who are important. Let me leave with you a kind of thought. Did it, didn't do it? I don't think this kind of action is in the standard operating procedure for the government of India and its institute. I don't think so. But I'm now a retired guy. What can I say? I just want to make one point. If in the Western world, or in fact in any world, if institutions and agencies which have, let me say, the ear of the senior most leadership, if they have a perspective, up to a point, other countries can kind of brush it aside, don't take it very seriously. But if it goes on and they feel that, look, we told you and you still did it, then, the person at the very top also feels obliged to go along with them because they matter more for him or her. And this is something that we all need to understand. Therefore, as Suhasini puts it, you're right. Legally, they have ways out and say something else, but the semantics are clear. Look at the headline. US want India. That's the headline of the Financial Times. Surely they know English, and surely they know what they've written there. So the fact of the matter is, yes, it compounds matters. Let's see how things work out, and our response has also been calibrated best possible manner in which it could. But these are matters which are par for the course and par for the course of the way things turn out. Now, you mentioned one more point, this thing about why did we not do anything much earlier and all, vis-a-vis Panu, the United States, etc. Look, today many people would say we should have done much more. We never, for example, registered cases against these guys. We never made formal requests for them. But then do remember, Panu is a US national. It's a case a bit different than what my colleague Ambassador Sinha mentioned about an Indian national being extradited. These countries are quite wary about extraditing their own nationals. And there are various reasons for that. You can see this Rana's case, which everybody has agreed, and yet things keep finding one way or the other of something getting stuck. So I'm afraid we have to go through it. A degree of, let me say, not just embarrassment, but much more than that will have to be tackled. But I do think that relationship with the United States and so many other components, huge and massive components, that this will also be, let me say, divergences are part of the huge convergences which are.
Yeah. So let me take that to Ambassador Sinha, the P word, power. That power actually also impacts how you respond to Canada and how you respond to the United States of America. Is that what's going on here, Ambassador Sinha?
Well, to a certain extent, certainly. That's absolutely correct. The fact is that India-US relations which used to be extremely bad some decades ago, have come a long way. We now have an extremely good relationship going, and nobody in India would like the likes of Pannu, etc., to spoil that relationship. In the case of Canada, the situation was slightly different. One, of course, Canada is not the United States in terms of power, and the other is that Canada's record in supporting terrorists is much longer and much worse than that of the United States. In the case of the US, there are a few pinpricks here and there, but in the case of Canada, there's a deliberate policy, it seems, to promote these kinds of terrorists being given shelter in Canada. So I think the responses were different, as also the allegations, as rightly pointed out by Terry. The allegation made by Canada was absolutely direct. By the US was certainly a little more subtle, a little more diplomatic than in the case of Canada. So I think our response was certainly measured. But I think we should cooperate with these countries to ensure that that they feel that we want to cooperate. And I think certainly in case there's any evidence of any of our rogue agents getting involved in this, we should take action, because it does not behove our country, and it's not good for our spy agencies themselves to get involved in such activities.
Sanjay, let me bring you in, and then I'll come to Suhasini and Terry for closing remarks. As someone who, as I said, has devoted your life to seeking elusive justice in the Kanishka bombing, I'm imagining that this conversation is somewhat very, when I say this conversation, I don't mean this program, but the global conversation is somewhat very isolating.
It is. It's deja vu, actually, for me, Barkha. When you go back to 1984, 85, and you look at the warnings that you got, not only in the month before the Kanishka, but a year before, and the acts of the Khalistanis hijacking planes and stuff like that. And then you see, guys who issued threats, and then our aircraft went down. I lost my family. Now you cut to today, and you see Pannu issuing threats, and I'm just baffled why the United States itself has not acted to uphold its own standing in the world community. It's their own citizen. It's exactly what I said. Your terrorist, is a terrorist, and mine is a freedom fighter. You spoke of Headley. He's attacked my city, Mumbai, and he's sitting somewhere in a Chicago jail or whatever. They're not bringing him here. They're not arresting this guy. So it's I'm deeply distressed, of course, and I think it's time that Indian government also puts it, like Suhasini said, put your case out strongly. The ambassadors have said India should be doing its bit to tell, point out sections. There are so many US sections I've mentioned before on your show, which this guy could have been clapped in irons. He should have been in Guantanamo Bay, according to me.
Yeah,
that's
I can only imagine what you must feel, Sanjay, you and other families. It must be absolutely gut-wrenching. So Hasani, I think that's the point, right? Like, the Foreign Ministry reaction said it took the inputs very seriously from the United States after the FT report, but did not really speak much about why this man is still free.
Well, I think there is, as Ambassador Sinha said, a certain compulsion, because our ties are actually quite good on every other respect. But I do feel that intelligence cooperation on issues like terrorism and terror threats is really intrinsic to our country. And is a very important part of any strategic relationship with any country that claims to be a good friend, as these countries do. I think, therefore, it's necessary to be a bit plain about what is actually going on over here, to not, as I said, brush it under the carpet and just deal with it in a kind of reactive manner, deciding how to react when Canada comes out in the open. But Canada says they were speaking to us for 3 months on the issue, reacting when the Financial Times comes out, but the US says that they raised these concerns in June of this year. I think we have to be much more proactive in understanding that there is an international attention on India's actions over this case. And it is also possibly the right time to explain India's case on a much more international stage, without worrying about ruining friendships when friends are not worrying about the same kind of issue. So I think that there's a little more front foot batting that I would expect our government to do at this point, particularly because it's very clear after the Canadian allegations came out. Then you saw the Five Eyes come out with statements supporting Canada.
Yeah.
And now you see this US, whatever it is, the indictment plus the White House spokesperson's comments, however you want to read them. I think we have to accept the fact that this issue is not going away.
So, Terry, I want to end actually with what's happening with the Canadian investigation. What's going on?
Good question. I wish I knew, and I wish some of us knew something about this investigation. There's no excuse for the Trudeau government for refusing to put its cards on the table. They make excuses. Oh, well, it's classified. Yeah, well, forget that. We all know that you've been bugging diplomats, and that the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance does that. It's no surprise to anybody at all. And they say, oh, well, we don't want to prejudice any future trial. Well, you've done that. The Prime Minister's got on his feet and said India's guilty. I mean, he's announced the conclusion of the investigation, if you like. Yeah. So these excuses don't wash. There's no reason for this complete failure of transparency. And so the Indian government's denials, they stand. I mean, they're not refuted by the Canadians. They've got to get into that game. They've got to put their cards on the table. But I say, in addition, that now that the Americans have weighed in on this, that now we're involved in this, we're pointing fingers, however subtly and politely we may do it, without overtly accusing the Indian government of being complicit in these murders, well, or plots of murder. Well, that changes the game. People are now, who initially said, well, Trudeau, you know, he's a bit flaky, he's a bit of an airhead. And believe me, there are some Canadians who feel that way. And now they're wondering, well, the Biden administration doesn't seem quite as flaky. And what about this unsealed? Now they're starting to believe that there may be smoke here, and maybe there's fire.